Hello, Halina Brown, and thank you for joining us for SCORAI Global interviews. And first of all, can I ask you to introduce yourself for a couple of sentences?
Yes. So I am a co-founder of SCORAI in 2008. I am a retired academic, professor of environmental science and policy at Clark University in the Boston area. And I am also an activist, energy activist in my home city of Newton as the chair of Citizens Commission on Energy that develops policies for the city on energy.
And for those who are not familiar with Newton, just where is it?
So Newton is a few miles west of Boston in Massachusetts on the east coast of the United States. It's a large, you would say, suburban city of about 90,000 population. It's a wealthy community. It's a very desirable place to live because of its location and its beauty, and especially its beautiful housing stock. So that's Newton. It's quite politically is very liberal, but when it comes to climate action, it's rather conservative.
Okay, so it's not necessarily going to be the leader of getting to a sustainable consumption trajectory then?
No, we are, as long as I am active in it, I will keep pushing. And we had many achievements in that area, but it's mostly about emissions of greenhouse gases from the building stock. We never mention consumption in our work because it would interfere with our progress. Consumption is not a topic that anybody wants to talk about. So
why are you so concerned about sustainable consumption and sustainable lifestyles? What got you in it, and what concerns you the most as you look today at what is happening?
Well, in my professional career, I worked, my degree is in chemistry, and I worked for many years in the area of pollution control, environmental pollution policy, risk assessment, public health issue, and so on. So it's all about chemical pollution. And then I moved out of interest, and because I met people in Europe who were working on technological innovations for climate. And I worked on that, especially on human behavior and changing it through technology, like different modes of mobility and so on and so forth. And I concluded after about a decade of working on it that technology has limits in how it can move us towards sustainability. And alone, as the panacea, it's not a panacea alone by itself. We, of course, need efficiency, and we need renewable energy, and we need some other innovations. But that alone is not going to solve the problem. That it's the more we reduce emissions of greenhouse gases to technological means, the more it is compensated adversely by growing consumption in the world. And the lifestyles we lead are just going to take us to the precipice. So I stopped working on technology and moved toward consumption. And this is how we established SCORAI. That's what it was. Me and two other colleagues, academics, in 2008, we realized we're all concerned about the same thing. So we established. Why am I so concerned about consumption? Well, of course, consumption is part of the production consumption system. So you have to look also at not just the end of it, the consumption and consumer behavior, but also what drives it, and that's production. And what I see is essentially that we're not getting anywhere. What the production is about is to make more goods and services, and of course people have to consume in order for the producers to make profit. It creates a lot of wealth, but this wealth is kept in the hands of a small minority of individuals and corporations. Very little of it trickles down to regular people, to the majority of people. Certainly more than 50% of Americans accrue no benefits from it. What it does create is a ever-growing wealth inequality. And the wealth inequality in itself has very negative effects on a society. It kills social trust. It interferes with any kind of collective action because people don't feel that others are sharing the burden, whatever. These two British epidemiologists, Wilkinson and Pickett, have written about inequality extensively and showed that societies with high inequality, like the United States, have much higher rates of, you name it, every social ill, teenage pregnancy, health problems, crime, you name it. So what we have here in this picture that I described is a lot of production, which grows the economy, allows governments to talk about progress because the economy is growing, threatens the ecology, but not only doesn't produce social good, but actually interferes with this. So it's a complicated picture to explain to a regular citizen, even one who is highly educated and attuned to news. But that's what I see.
So we're not necessarily gaining a higher level of well-being or a high level of happiness, as some use the index, and we're increasing the pressures on limited resources. So we're going on the wrong trajectory for society as well as the wrong trajectory for the planet.
Yes.
Well, who do you think are the agents, the most effective agents that we need to get on board so that they will take directions that would put us on the right trajectory? Why aren't we going on the right trajectory, and who should get us onto the right trajectory?
Why we are on the wrong trajectory is, apart from what I already said, is that people have been inculcated with a certain image. They were sold an image of what good life is. And a lot of it is connected with consumption and having more. And when you have high inequality in a society, people always aspire to those who are above them and want to distinguish themselves from those below them. And especially in a society like the US, which is where everybody is insecure. We are all economically insecure. 2 paychecks away from losing homes, people are, right? People are desperate to keep on that treadmill and hold on to it. So if people are convinced that this is a way to well-being, it's very hard to create a societal consensus or maybe even a social movement around it. And this is a built-in problem. Who could be the agents of change? Certainly government can provide infrastructure that would be more conducive to more sustainable lifestyles. And hopefully, if people would discover that there is another way to live and be deeply satisfied with their lives, they would be willing eventually to give up this image they've been told by marketers and advertisers, and the governments too. So what infrastructure? Well, they could change the taxation system that would reduce inequality, which, as you see, I talk a lot about inequality because I think it's one of the core reasons, not the only one, but it is there as part of the picture of consumption and destruction of the environment. So that would improve the well-being of a lot of people on the bottom, and they would not maybe demand economic growth the way they do, because right now people believe if the economy is growing, I will be better off, right? So it would be another way of creating well-being. The second thing is to build infrastructure, right? Especially, I see it especially in the United States, the suburbs, right? That's a very environmentally unsustainable way to live. So we have to increase more urban infrastructure that is at the same time affordable for people who are working. Right now, those who move to centers of the city are usually the wealthy. So, and of course, transportation, public services. So people don't have to feel so insecure economically and have this constant need to increase whatever they earn and what they spend. If a lot of their security is provided by services, public parks, public spaces, healthcare, and so on. And so that's what government can do, and strong transportation system. Public housing, to translate it to specific things, public housing, good transportation system, public services, public goods, art that's supported, so people can have a good life in more dense environments, closer to each other. As far as
So
a
it's not,
grassroots,
so it's not so much that the individual needs to review his personal choices, but more that the public services, I would guess whether it was central government or local government or both, provide the, let's call them the provisioning services that enable the individual to live a more sustainable lifestyle.
yes, with one caveat. I think an individual can also do a lot, because I had once a young person in high school ask me, what would I do? I want to live more sustainably. What should I do? And my answer was, forget recycling. Okay, it's a very nice thing to do, saves the municipalities money, but it doesn't do anything for sustainability. What you need, imagine yourself that you can afford to buy, you are a successful professional, and you can afford a house for $1 million. So you look at all houses that cost $1 million and you say to yourself, I don't need such a big house. I don't need all this land around. It's sufficient for me to buy a house for half of that price. So there is a choice an individual can make. But for that, we collectively have to change the way we see well-being. So it is a cultural change that can only happen if all of these variables change at the same time. That there are houses for $500,000 that are near all the amenities and are near good schools, right? And that people want to live there and discover that this is a good life. So I know we moved in our thinking about sustainable lifestyles from thinking about individuals to thinking about systems. But I think that maybe it's too much to think only about the systems. Individuals also do have agency.
So you would like to get society on board, as well as getting governments to provide those provisioning services that are needed. But how are we going to then get individuals on board? Or is it a question of groups, organization, social movements that bring people on board in the right choices?
Well, I think that's where activists and grassroots and organizations can play an important role. That's what I think. Because they can be, I mean, there are already many small-scale experiments around the world where people choose to live differently. But what I see, many, not all, but many of them are in remote communities where they grow food and so on. And that's a model that would not appeal to everybody. It certainly doesn't appeal to me. I don't want to wear hiking boots and a flannel shirt every day of my life. And I have no talent in growing anything. Everything I try to grow just doesn't go very well. I am a born urban person. And if I have an opportunity to live in a world of sufficiency, I would like to convince everybody around me, look, this is how I live, and create or interest organizations that are worried about sustainability to look at that as a model and to to tell the world about it. So we need small scale experiments, not, I wouldn't even say experiments, small scale initiatives, not experiments. And I think we would be able to convince municipalities to create changes in zoning sufficient for that kind of development. But it takes a vision and it takes a movement. I don't know if to call it social movement, because for me, social movements are more political. I always think of them as political and demanding social movement changes in power structures and so on. But it could be a large movement.
Some kind of a community that is, it has to kind of create a norm of practice, of a group, and not just depend on the individual doing something exceptional
in their own life. Yeah, it has to be a collective process. And I think that at this stage, because the younger generation cannot afford the type of housing that is available largely, we have a global housing crisis everywhere, especially in near big metropoli where jobs are, right? That's, I think, and they are beginning to think about it, right? Young people say, not possessions, but experiences. They don't want a lot of stuff that we, their parents and grandparents, have accumulated. So I think this is a fertile soil for that kind of movement. But I don't know if it's sufficiently organized at this point, because environmental organizations don't think so much about lifestyles and consumption. They are organizations around Boston are all fighting gas companies to get rid of gas, to put more renewable energy, to build houses that are well insulated. These are all important things, but they don't see the connection. That to me is a big problem, the connection.
Even though actually when the idea of sustainability first was evolved, it deliberately and positively made the linkage between environment, social and economic aspects, and asked in a way, or brought about in a way, that the environmentalists should not see themselves as being separate, but should link to the social agenda. And you feel they didn't really do that?
No, what you are telling me prompts me to ask, give me an example, because my memory of environmental movement, when it talks about social, it talks about individuals and groups protecting the natural environment. That's where I saw their social link. And eventually, they also discovered that the environmental organizations are very elitist, that people in low incomes are not interested. They consider it a privilege of the wealthy who want to protect their access to the beauty of the environment. So they became more sensitive to social issues. But I see environmental movement as different than you describe. Its focus on people was mostly because pollution was harming human health, and that's what I saw it in my career, because that's, we all influenced by what we've done in our lives, right? And so so I see it as a really big turn in the trajectory.
How do you see the economic aspect coming on board? How do you view the role of large corporations? Do you see them taking major steps, or are they the enemy? Are they the barriers? Can we get them on board, or are they going to be where we have to find a way of getting around them?
They're not going to get on board on different consumption. What corporations can do to that picture is produce with less damage to the environment. They can produce more energy efficient goods. And what they are good at is to get on board when a social change already takes place and consumers and citizens' priorities change, then they will join it, but always with an eye to sell them more stuff and services.
Yeah.
And what I hope is that the stuff and services will be those that support different lifestyles that people choose. But otherwise, even the most progressive, take Patagonia, right? Patagonia had that campaign about less consumption. Don't buy this jacket. That was a few years ago.
Yes, I remember it.
Don't need it, don't buy it. The result, the sales of that jacket increased. And they became masters in green green marketing. And other companies followed, right? So and even the very progressive president of this company says the fact is that we have to increase our market share. There is no way around it. If we don't do it, we die. So no, I don't think they will come on board.
So is the stimulus, the change going to come from a change of regime, from a major change in which political operating systems change the way in which we conduct our lives? Your background and your childhood and some as you grew up was in a very different situation than you are living today, and you grew up in Poland when it was in the communist era, and you see it today as it has come out of the communist era and is living now in a free market economy. How do you see the impacts and the implications, the opportunities of a major regime change? And how do you see what has happened in Poland and what perhaps was good in the past, or a negative or positive, and what can you combine together from what you see that would be beneficial?
Yes, you are right. I lived in communist Poland until I was 20 years old, so I remember it very well. There was a lot wrong with that system, of course, the individual political freedoms, the economy that was centrally planned and was stagnant, and all sorts of things that were no good. But as far as the lifestyle was, I have to say that I very fondly remember that lifestyle. It was what I call pre-consumer society. There were very few consumer goods. So we didn't spend a lot of time on shopping and on maintaining goods. When I got in elementary school my first pair of pantyhose, color red pantyhose, I was the queen of my school, right? That was, and we so immensely enjoyed these items. No, I mean, I would never think of just throwing anything out, right? And how we spend our time, we lived in a much smaller space, much smaller space. And we spent our time on outdoors, on cultural activities, reading, hanging out with friends. My parents were always, people were coming and hanging around. Nobody seemed to be in such a big hurry. No, and the summertime came, we went into the country, the land was owned, the forests were public forests. I didn't even understand the concept of, when I came to America, of ownership of a forest, couldn't understand it. And the lifestyle was very, it was a lifestyle of sufficiency. Of course, some people had more than others, but it was a life that I would love to reproduce now when I talk about sufficiency, without all the negatives. No, just the lifestyle. And people, for example, if somebody owned a car, everybody used it because it was understood. If somebody had to hurry up to go to medical appointment, they would say, can you give me a ride? Or could I use your car? Right? I'll buy gasoline and so on and so forth. So it was a much more communal situation. And this is something I continue being attracted to this day, even as a retired older person. So yeah, so there is a model. But what happened to Poland after 1990 is just incredible. It became within essentially within the first 2 decades, it became completely absorbed with consumption. And people are pushing out the suburbs now, development of suburbs. They get stuck in a traffic jam for hours. And so I don't know, is it inevitable? I don't know, that if there is an opportunity.
But there are a lot of elements of that we've lost them even in those countries which had them and they brought great benefit. It was sharing, collective, and there is nothing negative about things being collective, collaborative, empathy to others, less emphasis on the individual space, more emphasis on shared space. Less emphasis on individual activity and more emphasis on group, family, community, joint, shared space, shared activity.
Yeah, I wonder, do societies have to go through that process of discovering for themselves? People in those countries, those like Poland, felt for decades that the system in which they lived was imposed on them and that they were deprived. Travel abroad was highly restricted. So this image of America and Western Europe grew to mythical proportions in people's lives. And when the freedom came, that was the first thing they thought about, is to imitate it, right? And maybe they need to discover now that this is not all that it was promised to be. And in the process, the country became very polarized. The healthcare doesn't have money anymore, the system of healthcare. So people who have money buy privately healthcare. And the rest are stuck with the inadequate system. Maybe they have to discover that all this hyper-consuming society and individuality and private space is not all so great, that it has some very negative effects.
So if we look around the world, Halina, and we look about different regimes, some of which are more collective or public service orientated than others, and the US model being perhaps extremist individualism. Is there anywhere around the world, looking at the global scene, you would say, this is a country, this is a city, This is where I could identify a kind of way in which we should be going.
If it is probably possible to create some social consensus about we have to reduce our footprint and our right. Let's look collectively at what the major contributors are to this footprint and come up with a collective program of action. I think it's possible in a society.
So is this the question you would like to put on the global SCORAI agenda? And or are there other additional themes, items, questions that you think should have more emphasis and should be discussed more in the SCORAI Global agenda and discussion lists?
Yeah, I think when you brought it up some time ago about, the agenda for SCORAI, new agenda for SCORAI, I realized, yes, that's what we need to talk about. Yeah, well, look for models that would be attractive to us, to our value system, us, people who are concerned, who realize that that things are going, that our trajectory in the West is all wrong. Yeah, so I'm taking it to heart, this idea. Yeah, very much so. You as a member, right, of the board, yeah, you and I and several of us could try to change the agenda for SCORAI. Yeah.
I think there'll be different views from different members of SCORAI, and we'll try and pick them up and we'll try to bring them on board and we'll try to get different discussions going. So thank you very much, Professor Halina Brown, for your time.
You're welcome. Let me say one thing is that when I started the interview, I was so negative about everything. I said, what am I going to say? I mean, we're going to hell. But now ending on this note that you brought up gives me new energy to try again and to do something. So I want to thank you for this opportunity. It's been a learning experience for me. Great.
Thank you very much, Halina.